Okay, Algebra 2, day 10 notes on trig graphs are frequency and period. The frequency is the number of cycles from 0 to 2 pi, and the period is the length of one cycle. Alright, most of these come straight from the notes, so if you have them, it's great, follow along. If not, just try these on a separate sheet of paper. We're going to look at three equations real quick. Y equals 3 cosine x, y equals 3 cosine of 2x, and y equals 3 cosine of 1/2 x. They're all very similar. Alright, as you can see, the only thing different is this is x, 2x, or 1/2 x. Some things you want to start to do if you haven't already. Alright, it's like the last thing today in order to graph these or figure out the equation from the graph. Start taking like a little bit of notes for each question. Alright, like the first one. 3 cosine x, what is the midline? Alright, the midline from day 9 would be at the end of the equation, plus or minus something. This one doesn't have one, so the midline is 0. Alright, so our graph is essentially going to start at 0 and go from there. The next thing I look for is the amplitude. Alright, amplitude. It is the first thing you see in the equation. That's 3. Right? It's positive always, so the amplitude is 3. That means this graph is going to go 3 above our midline and 3 below our midline. The new things that we're going to look for, right? The frequency and the period. Frequency first. All right, the frequency is the number of cycles from 0 to 2 pi. Everything we've graphed up until now had one cycle from 0 to 2 pi. So sine graph did one cycle, cosine did one cycle, all right? This is a cosine. Let's just graph this real quick. It's cosine graph, so I'm going to start above my midline. So above 0, how far above? I'm going to start 3 above it, because that's cosine graph. All right, so this will be at 3 if you're doing a scale. And let's say this goes out to 2 pi. All right, half of 2 pi is pi in the middle. You can make a scale a little more accurate if you want, it's fine. Cosine graph starts above the midline, whatever the amplitude is, and eventually it's going to end there for one cycle. All right, it's like a cosine wave. Halfway across, it'll be on the other side. It'll be 3 below. So obviously not to scale, but close enough. There's your graph for this one. All right, 3 cosine x. That's off a little bit, close enough. So we're using a calculator, you can. There's just a lot more to it. Make sure in radian mode, all that good stuff. Change your scale to radians. All right, type in 2 pi in your window if you want to do that way. You can. It's just as easy to learn it and do it this way, though. Frequency, the number of cycles that we just saw from 0 to 2 pi, that is one cycle. So the frequency for this one is 1. All right, the period, you'll see in a minute that they're very much related, actually inversely related. The period is the length of one cycle. We just said, well, this is one cycle all the way across here, so that is the length of 0 to 2 pi. The period is 2 pi. All right. Next one, very similar, 3 cosine of 2x. So everything pretty much the same. Midline, still 0. Amplitude, still 3. The frequency, though. All right, frequency, period. The frequency is actually in the equation. This 2 right here is actually the frequency. All right, you didn't know that yet, but now you do. So frequency is actually written in the equation. The period, we can get to that in a second. If you think about it though, I'm going to see 2 cycles from 0 to 2 pi. Let's graph this real quick. Same idea, starts at 3. All right, if you want to make it out to 2 pi again, you can. Half of that's pi. But if I'm going to see 2 cycles from 0 to 2 pi, the length of one of those cycles has got to be out to pi. All right, so the period in this one is just pi. So it's still a cosine graph. I'm starting 3 above it because it's cosine, the amplitude's 3. So I got to start here, and I got to be at 3 again by the time I hit pi. It means it has to be -3 halfway across that. Half of pi is pi over 2 if you wanted to label these. So I'm going to do a cosine wave from 0 to pi. If you wanted to keep going up to 2 pi, it'd be the same picture again. All right, halfway across, it's got to hit the bottom. Back to where you started. Close enough. All right. So the period, the length of one cycle is pi. If I'm going all the way up to 2 pi, I see 2 cycles. That's why my frequency is 2. Same idea of the next one. I got 1/2 x in here now. All right, those of you remember the transformation rules. The stuff inside the parentheses is a horizontal stretch or compression, all right? So this one's actually gonna be a stretch horizontally because it's 1/2. Same idea, same picture. If you want to label everything or list everything out, midline 0, amplitude is 3, frequency is right there. I can see it. It's in the equation. It's 1/2. Think about it. If I have a half a cycle from 0 to 2 pi, right? That's what frequency means. What is the period going to be? There's a little formula for that. I'll give you that in a second. Let's try to graph this. -3, 0, out to 2 pi. All right, I'm going to see half a cycle from 0 to 2 pi. I know it's a cosine. I know I start above the midline. If I'm going to see half a cycle, that's only like half of this picture up here. I'm just going to make it really long, stretch it out. So it's actually got to be like one of these. All the way there's a half a cycle. All right, if I want to go out to, twice that, it would be out to 4 pi. Let's say out there is 4 pi. All right, just double 2 pi. There would be my other half of the cycle. Just stretches everything out. All right. So the frequency, I saw half a cycle from 0 to 2 pi. All right. What is the length of one cycle? The period. That was 0 to 4 pi. So the period is 4 pi. All right, that one's straight in the notes if you have them. I'm going to check that out. It's not that easy. Hopefully somebody's starting to see a relationship between this frequency and the period. All right. 1 is 1 is 2 pi, 2 is pi, 1's 1/2 is 4 pi. All right, it's in the notes. The frequency, they also refer to it as the letter B for some reason. Don't get hung up on the letters, just make sure you know what it is. Anytime you have a frequency times the period, it always equals 2 pi. All right, good formula to know. You're going to use it a lot. Use it again next year, not just this year. Usually you don't want to just have it this way. You're trying to solve for one of these, all right? Trying to solve for the period usually. If you've done delta math, yeah, there's lots of those on there. The period is 2 pi. How would you solve for it? Just divide by frequency, right? Divide by the frequency. Again, they call the frequency B sometimes, depending on what book you're looking at. So you're going to use that for delta math, and there's a few in the notes and homework if you try those. That's good. Let's try one more. I'll give you one more out of the notes. All right, so if you have like y equals 2 sine of 4x, it says graph this thing. All right, there's lots of graphing on the delta math. Try to come up with a good routine that works every time. Hopefully some of you are catching on a little bit. You're going to see lots of these. This is a sine, so let's throw a sine here instead of cosine. All right, just the general formula. Make sure you know A is the amplitude, B is the frequency now, C is the midline. Identify everything you can from each equation. For this one, I always start with the midline. It's going to help you with your graphing. Midline of this one, there's nothing there, so that's 0. Amplitude, how far above the midline am I going to go? I'm going to go 2 above it, 2 below it. Frequency, again, it's right there in the equation. Look at it. Frequency is a 4. That means I'm going to have 4 cycles from 0 to 2 pi. And you always want to get the period as well. All right, what is the period? What is the length of one cycle? That might be the most important, actually. If you're not sure, can't do it in your head, just set up the equation, right? Period equals 2 pi over the frequency, which is 4. Just simplify it. 2 pi over 4 is what, pi over 2? If you do the word problems the next couple of days in the notes, they're not always in terms of pi. Sometimes it's real world numbers, actual numbers and decimals and stuff, so a little bit different sometimes. So for this one, though, it's pi over 2. If you're making a graph of this, I'll make a quick sketch. All right, this one's different. It's a sine graph, positive sine. Sine, hopefully you're thinking, well, it goes up, back down, back to this from the unit circle, right? The y-coordinates. Picture needs to look like that. I need to have it starting at 0, so my midline, again, nice and easy, it's 0. Amplitude is 2. I'm going to go 2 above it. Eventually, I'm going to go 2 below it. All right, the length of one period is pi over 2. So I need one full cycle by the time I hit pi over 2, wherever that is on your scale, I guess. That means I need this picture squeezed in here from 0 to pi over 2. If you want to break that down in half, you can. Half of pi over 2 is pi over 4, if you want to label it. Some of those on Delta Math are labeled very differently. All right, check out those labels, be careful. The sine, I gotta start here, I gotta end up here. All right, I also go through 0 here. I gotta go to the top, back down, back to where I started. There's one cycle from 0 to pi over 2. If it said graph all of them out to 2 pi, you'd have to put 4 of those in there. All right, you keep going as pi over 2, that means pi is over here. Same picture again, all the way up, back down. 2 pi, you'd see all 4 cycles. I'm gonna run out of them if I do all of them. There's one of them, all right? All you're looking for is that one full cycle, whether it's sine or cosine. Don't forget, if it's a negative, I just go down first, or I start down here first if it's cosine. Little things, lots of details.